This episode is brought to you by Zencastr. Zencastr is the number one tool for all podcasters. You can record high-fidelity audio between remote locations and get studio-quality sound. Go to Zencastr.com and use coupon code THATENTERTAINS for 20% off for 3 months or 20% off an annual plan.
This is a That's Entertainment podcast.
Awesome. Just tell people they're awesome and mean it.
Awesome.
Awesome. Awesome.
Did you have an awesome time? Did you drink awesome shooters and listen to awesome music and then just sit around and soak up each other's awesomeness?
Awesome. 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 That was awesome. You guys are awesome. No. You're awesome. You are awesome.
Sir, you are awesome. Seriously.
Awesome. Awesome. Awesome.
Everything is awesome.
Welcome to this week's edition of Everything is Awesome. I am your host, Kev, and this is the show where we sit down and talk about awesome things with awesome people. Before we get to this week's guests, I do want to just kind of update everybody from last week's show, because I know I got really sleepy in the middle of it, and I don't know where that show went, if I'm being honest. So this is our first episode that's part of the That's Entertainment Podcast Network. We're back at the mothership. It's August 1st, and we have some things going on. We have our Patreon is now live. There's still going to be some tweaks to that as far as we're going to throw a video up and whatnot. But our Patreon is officially live, patreon.com/thatentertains. And on that Patreon, what you're doing is subscribing to the network. So not just Everything is Awesome, not just That's Entertainment, but to the That's Entertainment Podcast Network, which consists of, right now, this show, Everything is Awesome, The Ladies Who Rant, Bullies Keep Out, are the three staple shows. And then we are bringing on another show in a couple weeks that we will make a formal announcement for. Maybe next week, we'll see. We just got to kind of finalize some things before we make that happen. And out of those 4 shows on the network, 3 of them are in-house shows, so you'll definitely get early access to those 3. But all 4 shows are going to be starting to roll out exclusive content to the Patreon, and what that means is each show, once we figure out what they're going to do, is going to have a responsibility to create one thing a month for the Patreon. If they create more, that's great, but at minimum one thing a month. And that will be exclusive to the Patreon subscribers, and you can subscribe for as little as $2 a month, and that gets you an on-air thank you on all our shows. It gets you a place on our thank you page on the website and whatnot. And then if you go to $5 a month, you get the early access, you get exclusive content, and the level below that, the online thank you and the shout outs and whatnot. So, and there's a couple other levels there that if you want to support us at higher level, but the whole purpose of the That's Entertainment Podcast Network Patreon is to, most importantly, cover our operating fees. We've been doing this now for 11 years, and over that, of course, 11 years, we've probably spent about $8,000 to start these shows, to operate these shows, to host these shows, to advertise these shows, to get equipment for these shows. Every cost that you need to do a podcast has been self-funded, and I'll continue to self-fund because it is a manageable cost as far as a per month basis is concerned. I can manage that cost. I love podcasting. I love editing. I love I love giving a platform for other people to share their voice. But we do want to grow the network, and we do want to have other voices on this network that are represented. And the whole point of the That's Entertainment Podcast Network, at least in my eyes, is to be a welcoming, inclusive place that listeners and podcasters of all types feel welcome in and feel safe in. And if you're a podcaster that or you're someone that wants to be a podcaster and you just don't know how to do it, and we definitely want to talk to you, and we definitely want to get your voice out there. Diversity is real important to me, so there's a lot of shows that I had said that were going to be coming in 2018 that you'll see on thatentertains.com/network page get rearranged to say coming soon or coming in 2019 or something like that, because I either want to find another host for them so that it's not me. As much as I would love to do those shows, I don't have A, the time, but B, and this is way more important, there's no reason that I need to be on another podcast. I am going to be launching other podcasts that have me on it, but they make more sense for me. They don't have as much time commitment and whatnot. But these other shows have like a time commitment, and I think it would be really important to have a diverse cast of hosts on this network, and it's more important for me to either find hosts for those shows or just have different shows, and maybe one day I'll get to those, or there'll be specials or something like that. So you're going to see some stuff switch around there. We are going to be launching 3 new shows on the network. Probably in September, and then the other one will probably not launch until 2019, but it's going to go into production. We're going to be doing a Star Wars podcast that will launch sometime in September. We're going to be doing a show related to the Party One podcast from Jeff Stormer. That will be launching in September or October, and then there is I don't have many details to give because we're still in way early pre-production, but we have kind of our first audio drama / improv thing, though it's far from comedy, that will be going into recording production hopefully in 2018 with a release date of 2019, but still kind of hammering out the details there with the people that we're going to be working with, and that one will be one specifically that I'm background only, save for maybe a small role here or there that may need to be filled if we decide to bring a certain character on. That being said, there's a lot to offer for the Patreon, and as time goes on, our tier levels I never plan on increasing. I plan on having that the same. It's for as little as $2, so you can skip out on a coffee one day, and that will cover 2 months of your subscription. Or if you, I think the $5 one has the most value on an economic level, where it's not too much money out of your pocket, but you get good value. The other higher tiers are great if you can afford it, and you really want to. You're a huge fan of the shows on this network. They're definitely worth the value. But as someone who is tight with money, $5 is I look at that $5 pledge on other Patreons a lot, and if it's got good value, I usually subscribe to it. And I think the exclusive content from the creators that you love is something that is high value in my eyes. So check it out. Go to patreon.com/thatentertains, and you can check out the Patreon yourself and look at the tiers and whatnot. If you have any questions, feel free to hit me up on Twitter at thatnerdykev, or email us at awesome@crudehammerstudios.com, and I'll answer your questions and whatnot. And I hope that you subscribe. If not, you know what, there's other ways you can support that show, or any of our shows on the network, and that's simply by going to iTunes and leaving a 5-star rating and review. When you do that ranks us higher and ranks our shows higher on the feeds of iTunes, and that means more people can see us and listen to us, and then hopefully listen to the same message and go ahead and help support this show in similar ways. Word of mouth recommendations is also a great way to do that. So from the bottom of my heart, I thank anyone that at least even looks at the Patreon, that supports this show, supports any show on this network, because these are all talented creators. I'm not even really talking about myself at this point. The shows that we have on our network, and the shows that we plan on bringing onto the network, and the creators and podcasters that we're bringing to the network in the near future, they're all super talented people, and you supporting them and supporting this network would mean the world to them, and definitely mean the world to me. All right, this week we are going to be sitting down and talking with Nick O'Neill. He is the co-founder of Make 5 Calls, 5calls.org. And that is a utility that you've heard us talk about from time to time at the end of our show when we do our call to action. And it is a great utility that you can use either on the website or on your phone to call your state representatives and let them know that you care about certain issues and that you want them to take action on those certain issues. There's several options when it comes to contacting your state reps, and Nick and I discussed that here. But calling is the most important thing. It's something that they get right away. It's something that they can count right away. You fax, you email, they might not get to it for a couple of days. Short of walking into their building and having a sit-down conversation with them, this is the most important thing that you can do to have your voice heard and to make sure that you're representing your community by letting your state representatives know how you feel about whatever the issue is. And you can go to 5calls.org to see a list of issues that are there. If there's an issue that you want to talk about, you can just search it and see if there's a pre-made script already. But that's the great thing about 5calls.org. The most intimidating thing in the world is calling someone about an important issue and not knowing what to say, and 5calls.org really kind of sums it up for you. So this episode is probably one of the most quote-unquote political episodes that we have or ever had, and we did our best to keep it party free. We did our best to not sway one way or the other towards a party, because I have my views. Most people know what my views are, but that doesn't mean I want to alienate the other side. B, I believe that this service, although they probably won't have an issue that you agree with if you're on another side, calling your state representatives is important for every single citizen in America. And whether you are a conservative or you're a liberal, there's issues that you care about. And if you want your voice heard on those issues, you need to make sure you call your state reps. While I don't think that it's great to support certain things, you have the option to do that and whatnot. So 5calls.org makes it easy for every single citizen to voice their opinion, whether your opinions swing right or swing left. This service is available to you as an American citizen to call your representatives, and 5calls.org makes it easier for a lot of us to do that who are really shy. I'm not a person who likes to do cold calls like this, and I've done it a handful of times now, and it feels empowering, and it feels good to have my voice heard, especially when you get a letter back from your representatives, or I don't think I've gotten a call back yet, but I've gotten letters, like not handwritten, typed letters with a signature. I'm sure it's a generic thing, but someone took the time to send a letter out to me to say, I've heard what you have to say, and I assure you I am on blah 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 blah. And it might be lip service, but at the end of the day, I hope that the lip service leads to change. So we've bumbled on for long enough. This is one of the longer pre-intros. I assure you they probably won't be this long in the future. This was just a special episode. It's the first episode on the new network, and we had some things to talk about on that. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Nick O'Neill, the co-founder and creator of 5calls.org. I got a little nuts, so now I kind of eventually this will be part of the show.
Well, my writer specifically demands that I have an intro, so I'm not sure what we're going to do about that.
Oh, I guess there should have been, like, I should have got, what do they call it when the talent sends like the demands, like I need to have nothing but red M&Ms it's waiting for me in my green room.
I've taken care of the M&Ms on my side. Don't worry about that part.
But so Nick, thanks for doing the show. it was like kind of random. I've been like thinking about pulling the trigger, like contacting. I didn't know it was going to be you specifically, but contacting someone from fivecalls.org to be on the show. And I don't know, I forget what it was. I think we talked about it on Twitter, but something was like finally was like, oh, I just gotta finally ask them to be on the show.
It was Wawa. I know it was Wawa.
But yes, I actually, and I think I've used Five Calls once or twice. I need to get like back into the swing of I told myself I want to start using it every day. And I am one of those terrible people that like, I have too many things going on in my head. So like I get sidetracked really easily. Yeah. But yeah, no, you guys have been like a great service for I guess what many people are calling the resistance. And I actually heard, I don't know what podcast you listen to or anything, but you guys came on my radar from, I don't know, have you heard of the One Shot podcast?
I don't think I have, no.
Okay, so yeah, One Shot is an actual play podcast network actually, but specifically the main show. They just played a bunch of different role-playing games every session, whether that's one episode or 4 episodes. It depends on the game and story. And the host, James D'Amato, is very pro, like at the end of his episodes he calls attention to an issue and then he suggests using fivecalls.org. That is the website, right? I'm getting that right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
No, I would interrupt you if it wasn't, I'm sure.
And he recommends you guys all the time to make your voices heard. That's
great. I mean, this is like the key to what we want to do here, which is make it really easy for you to make your voice heard about a specific issue that you care about, right? We list all these issues on the site, and it's there's usually 6 to 8 things on the front page at any given time, stuff that you would know from listening to the news or reading Twitter, stuff like that. And the goal is not for everybody to call on everything. It's about picking that one thing that you really care about. If it's, family separation or, Scott Pruitt, who just got booted out of the administration today, or anything else that like tickles your fancy. That's the thing that you need to call about. We just want to make it really easy for you to go there and see something that you instantly know that you support and then call on that thing.
And I mean, it is super easy as someone who's used it a small handful of times and truly believe that you should be using it on a more regular basis. And I guess, like you said, assuming that there's something there that you need to make your voice heard about. But it's now I don't think I've used the actual app. I think I've used like a combination of the desktop and then my phone or whatever, which I want to get into the app in a little bit just to talk about the ease of that, or what I assume is the ease of that. But when did you guys start Five Calls Up? Was it with the 2016 results, or have you guys been around longer than that?
No, it's just been basically since early 2017. I'll give you the whole story.
Okay, perfect.
So Rebecca, my wife, and I, we worked on the 2016 Hillary campaign. We live in San Francisco now. I'm from Philadelphia. And
time out. I don't know if I told you, but I am also Philly. I am in Bucks County right now.
Yeah, I knew this.
Okay.
I thought we were talking about specifically Wawa on Twitter, and that was like, of course, like
that's
what
it was. Yeah, that's what it was. And I talk to too many people a day, and I've just been really like, I just got caught up on like getting everything that I need to get posted for this podcast up. Like we just finished the Philadelphia Podcast Festival, so like I'm finally in like cool down mode. So I apologize, but yeah, that's right. The Wawa is what made me pull the trigger. But I don't know that I actually knew that you were from Philly. I just assumed you were from the Wawa country, which is a couple different states.
Just a Wawa aficionado,
oh my God. Okay. So I'm going to derail for a second here, because this makes me, I love, especially when it's like ambushed on me from a fellow Philadelphian. Do you follow football?
No, sadly.
Oh no. So, all right. So, did you pay attention to the Super Bowl just like as a Philadelphian
Of
in
course,
general?
yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. I
Were
have
you in a?
a cadre of people who are also from Philadelphia and San Francisco, and
Oh, okay.
when Philadelphia themed things come up like the Super Bowl, of course you get together with those people and you watch the Super Bowl together.
Yes. How was it? Because I'm always interested how the Super Bowl felt to a fan that was outside of Philly when it happened. So, were you with your buddies that were all Philadelphia, fans when the
Yeah,
win
of course.
happened? So, what was
Yeah.
it like where you were when we won?
Okay, I like caveat here. None of us are like true like
Oh,
football fans, right? So
Okay.
it's the one of those things where you're like, oh, 2 weeks beforehand, you're like, oh, it looks like Philadelphia's in the Super Bowl. I guess we should watch that, right?
Okay.
And you sort of like get up to speed on what the context is and all the like sort of major players that are things that are going on before the Super Bowl. But really, it's mostly like, we got to watch the Super Bowl. We're from Philly. Like this is a requirement.
Yeah.
And so you get together and you do that, and you watch some people climb some grease light poles, and hopefully you go home happy.
Yeah, it's that's interesting because I guess I would do the same thing if it was because I'm not a big basketball guy or I guess that's really the only sport. Like, I mean, I guess the same thing could be said about hockey, where I'm kind of only in it when it comes to like the last couple games of the regular season and then postseason. But basketball, I just like, and I guarantee either you or someone else who's not a big football fan will say the same thing. But for basketball, like, it's just hard for me to watch them go back and forth on the court with the ball. Like, I feel like if I have like potential to play that game, it's not. I just can't get behind it because I'm not athletic. So
yeah, I mean, I've had the perfect opportunity to get into basketball over the last couple of years because the Warriors are right here, and they're like, they've been in what is it like 3 of the last 4 finals, right?
Yeah.
So I have totally gotten into that, and I've been like, cool, I'll watch the last X number of games or the finals or whatever. But I had definitely tried to get into the games beforehand, but somehow it's just not the same.
Yeah, no, I that's a sport, and I was the same way with hockey, where I was just like, I didn't get the concept of watching people go back and forth with whatever their ball was, or in hockey, the puck. And then eventually I got into hockey. And again, I sit here and say this, and it's like, I guess anyone could say the same thing about football, which is like the sport I'm super passionate about. There's just something, I think the with me, like every other sport, there's just so many games. So it's always just like, oh, I can just catch it later. And eventually I just forget.
Yeah, sure.
With football, it's if you miss a game, you miss like a 16th of the season.
That's true, yeah.
So there's so few opportunities really to watch football. And like this year, and I've, my kids are young. So this was the first year that like I kind of got to watch games with them because my son he's like 6.5. My daughter turned 4 about a month and a half ago. And so they're just getting to the point where they're letting me do things again. So and they'll actually kind of watch some football with me. So like for the last couple of years, I haven't really been watching football as much as I would like to, but this year, like I watched more games, and it was like the year to get back into it with Wentz and everything. And it's been a really exciting time. Have you been back to Philly since we've won?
I have not, no.
It's and again, I guess it's different if you're not like a super fan, but one of the great things, and I had someone who's out in somewhere in California, I think LA area, on the show, and they asked me how it is because they're originally from this area too, and I was like, and again, I don't know if this will resonate with you, but prior to the Super Bowl, prior to this year of football, like if you walk around out of football season in your Eagles gear, it's kind of like a knowing look of shame, almost like we know, like, hey, like go Birds, we'll get them next year. But now, like still on July 5th, I could walk around wearing my Eagles hat whether it's the championship hat or just the regular everyday Eagles hat. And there's just like a knowing sense of pride. There's a smile that comes along with that nod. And like the perfect example is my fiance teaches 5th grade, and we went on a field trip to Washington, D.C. And on the way home, we stopped at a Golden Corral in Maryland somewhere. I walk in wearing my Eagles hat, and there's 2 other Eagles fans there, and we go into like a 20-minute conversation about football. Would not have happened pre-Super Bowl at all.
No.
Yeah.
It's like the shared experience of like having that, you all live that moment of like the Super Bowl and it being super close and you having no idea which way it was going to go, right?
Yeah.
Seeing that in public, it brings you back to that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it is. I don't know if you plan on coming back to Philly anytime soon, or if you're kind of like, boom, everyone's out there out west for you. But if you get the chance to come to Philly, just kind of like, I feel like even just like in general, walking around, everyone's just a little bit happier these days. And who knows when it's going to go away, but I feel like the whole city and the suburbs are just, it's happier.
That's pretty cool.
All right. So we've gone on a 10-minute derailment, but because of my tirade on football. So please continue with your story with make calls, or five calls down together.
All right, let's see, where were we going? Right. Okay. So, we're in San Francisco. It's, summer of 2016. I've always been sort of involved in the local politics around here, cause that's where I felt like stuff was the most impactful for me to work on. Right. Mm-hmm. So, there's a lot of city and state propositions that people vote on, which are these like ballot measures that come up every 6 months or a year. And, statewide stuff maybe is a little bit more important, but citywide stuff is a lot of like, there's a really surprisingly small number of signatures you need to get something on the citywide ballot. So it's like, it's a lot of absurd stuff that people should not be voting on. Like, should this bond measure pass? Should the city fund this thing, with a specific holdout for this other thing? It's like, it gets into the weeds way, way too much. So a lot of the people around here need a lot of guidance, because when you vote, you're presented with this list of, 10 things that are all like, how would I know whether or not this is good or bad? Right.
Yeah.
So there's sort of a reputation around here of like, okay, you look at the ballot, you do some research, you have to do some research to know what to vote on. And I try and help people out who are in the area come up with what makes sense for them. I give my reasoning for, why are you voting on one thing or another? And, if you don't know how to vote on something, just don't vote on it. And that's, the easiest thing to do. So that all stopped mid 2016, where, you're seeing Trump win all of these primary elections, even though everyone's saying, no, it's not going to happen. Like the prediction is, wildly in favor of somebody else. And I'm like, what? I still think it's a long shot, but I'm going to feel real shitty if I did jack shit during 2016 and he ends up winning. So we got involved locally, and we joined a group of people in San Francisco who are volunteers for calling into other battleground states that are nearby. So a lot of stuff like making phone calls into Nevada. Mm-hmm. And as we get closer and closer to November, my wife's from Las Vegas, and we got this opportunity to go out to Las Vegas and work as part of the field campaign there, which is really fascinating because it's something that I know that there's a lot of infrastructure that pops up in battleground states and in cities all around the country for these elections, and I've never really been a part of this massive mobilization of people. So it's really fascinating to see all the things sort of come together for that. So we had the opportunity to go out to Las Vegas for a couple of months and work the field campaign there. And while we were doing that, we're using all of these tech tools for campaigns that are sort of frustrating and clunky to get around. They feel like they were designed sort of like 10 years before you use them. And if you know sort of how fast tech stuff moves, it's not a great experience if something is like 10 years old and it looks like it just hasn't been updated at all. So so we're like, this is our biggest frustration on the campaign, and we're writing all the software while we're working out there to try and like help the field staff out and make the experience better for everybody. And then we lose the campaign, and it's incredibly devastating. And we get back to San Francisco, and it's like 2 or 3 days after we've like gotten over our incredible hangover, like literally incredible hangover, and we're like, how do we like what's the thing that we do to help in the future? And of course, the thing that we thought of first is like, we want to make campaign software that's better. But we weren't connected in any way for this. Like literally the first national campaign we had been on was just like, a month before that. Like, how do we make that connection and make that happen? So we decided that wasn't going to work for us. And the alternative that we came up with was a project that we had seen the campaign use while we were working there, which was like, someone would come into an office and they would say, hey, I can't come into this office and spend 2 or 3 hours on the phones here calling voters, but I want to help out. And there was a site that you could go to, and it was very, very specific about how you could help out. So you could say, I want to call women voters about healthcare in Michigan. And that sort of specificity about who you were calling and what you were calling about gave people this incredible confidence about being able to get on the phones and help try and drive people to get out to vote. So we sort of flipped that on its head, and we said, we want to give people a really great tool for calling their representatives about issues that they really care about. So we wanted to provide everything that they needed that was all in the same place. So that's like a description of what the actual issue is. Maybe you're not super familiar with it. You just want to get the great parts of like why you should care about this issue. We wanted to automatically look up your representative's information based on where you are. If that's like, you can enter a zip code or an address, or you can just let your browser or app find your location for you. And then we wanted to give you a little script that you can read if you had no idea what to say. If this was your first time calling your representative, then you don't know, is this going to be a 5-minute conversation or a 1-minute conversation? And it is, of course, the latter. It's like literally maybe 30 seconds on the phone. But people don't know this, right? So if you give them a little script and you say, it's going to be you reading this like 2 sentences, and then you get off the phone, people understand like, oh, it's actually a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. It's not like a conversation. It's you saying, hey, this is my position. You should, take note of this and give it to my senator, give it to my congressperson. So we put all these things together. We sort of out of the blue came up with the idea of calling it 5 calls, which was, while sort of inaccurate, because usually you call 3 people, you call, your representative and your 2 senators. It was really simple for people to understand what they had to do, why they were there. So the name is sort of has helped us in a lot of ways. And we put this out right before the inauguration in early 2017. I got a bunch of people together, some friends who wanted to do some, just volunteer work on design or helping build the thing or that sort of stuff. And then we released it right before the inauguration, and it was truly the like height of everyone's outrage, right? Like everyone was super angry about all of the initial cabinet appointments, and just like it had built up over the last couple of months of like all this outrage about what was going on, and people were trying to figure out how to channel that correctly. And I think we came out at just the right time to sort of channel that towards representatives. And then once people knew that we were updating stuff regularly, they'd come back, every couple of days, every week, see the new stuff that was on the site, make calls about that. And then it just sort of fed on itself over the last year.
Now, I don't know what I always thought of the name 5 calls. Going back to that, I always I don't know why it didn't click that it was like supposed to be like 5 calls on that particular issue. Where it's realistically 3. For me, it was like I always like the thought process. I was like, oh, that's like pick 5 things that you care about and make those phone calls. That's like you've simplified it even further for me, because like I don't have to do so much work now. Not that it's if there's 5 things, obviously call about it. What's now in a situation where there's several issues that you may want to call about, is the recommendation to like call about everything at once, or kind of call about an issue a day, or like what's your recommendation there?
Yeah, we get a lot of feedback on this. The tricky part is that it's based on who your representative is. Some people have a lot of representatives have a lot of experience entering stuff into there's this whole software that helps them tally the opinions that you give them over the phone and the reports that they make to the representatives based off of that information. And some of them, it's really easy for the staffers that are on the phone to put in multiple issues that people care about and how they feel about them. And for other people, it's really hard for them to do that, and they can really only take like one issue at a time. So we recommend that to start, you're just giving, make one call about this single issue. And then maybe once you do it a few times and you understand and you develop a rapport with the person on the other side of the phone, you can ask them, hey, can I give you, my opinion on more than one thing? And pile it on. But definitely initially just start with one.
And is it something that, and this is maybe where like I was falsely under the impression, or maybe correctly, is like if you're calling about an issue, is it something that you call about once, or do you call about like if you want to call once a day, you would call once a day?
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely call once a day on a topic. I'd say that's probably the most that makes sense for a person to do. So all of this information about who's calling is collected and funneled towards the representative in the form of a tally, essentially, right? Mm-hmm. Like, here's how many people support this, here's how many people oppose this. And it's largely a function of how much people care about a particular issue, right? Mm-hmm. If you care about something a lot, you're going to call on that issue, it's going to come up in the news again, and you're going to be outraged over it again, and you're going to call on it again. Maybe it's just the next day, or maybe it's 2 days later, right? Mm-hmm. And that on the other side of the phone, that's you, saying, oh, I'm going to call twice, or I'm going to call like 3 times over the course of a couple of days. On the other side of the phone, that is, a couple 100,000 people in a congressional district, let's say, who are all sort of making that decision individually, and then driving people, and then they're collecting all that data, and it's making its way to that representative. So it's this effect of like one person making a small choice of saying, hey, I'm going to call once, or I'm going to call twice about this particular issue. And then the collective action of everyone who cares about that issue is funneled up towards the representative in the form of, people really care about this, or people really have like a really close personal tie to what this issue is, right? They really feel strongly about like this family separation stuff because, they have kids and they can't imagine being separated from their kids, and they have no idea, how that would feel if you were an immigrant, right? Mm-hmm. So it's based off of, your own personal preference and how you feel about that issue.
Okay. So because that was my, I don't want to say my hesitation, but that's like in the back of my mind, it's something that's like, well, if I like, is it overkill if I'm calling more than once? And it sounds like it's not. It sounds like that's something that they appreciate and take into account for how much you care.
Yeah. Perfect. I mean, maybe there are different offices as well, right? Especially if you're calling a senator. Not only do they have an office in DC with a phone number, but they have an office in, a bunch of major cities in your state, right?
Yeah.
And maybe you can like make it a little more interesting for yourself by calling different offices, seeing if you can identify all the people who answer the phones, right? Like there are some people who literally call that much, where the people on the other side of the phones, they know the name of the person who's calling. They can recognize their voice. Like they develop sort of like a relationship with these people. It's really fascinating.
That sound. I mean, and this is coming from someone who I'm so have a big aversion to like calling, like in even if it's like my parents or whatever. It's like always I'd rather fire off a text. So that's like what I love about 5 calls is the whole script thing. That way I don't have to worry too much. But so the idea of like, I don't know, calling all these different numbers has always been like, before I heard of 5 calls, has always been like, oh my God, I don't want to do it because it sounds like a burden almost.
Yeah. Like you have no idea how it's going to turn out. Like that's like, this is the eternal like dilemma of like millennials getting on the phone, right? They're like, oh, am I going to say this? Am I going to say like, what if someone is confrontational on the phone? Like, what am I going to do? Like but in reality, like, this is not that, right? Like, no one's going to be confrontational on the phone just because you're calling your representative. They're just there to, like, they are literally, interns who are doing a job of recording someone on the phone. If they were to, like, argue with everyone who gets on the phone, they would not be having a pleasant day.
Yeah, and I would imagine that the shorter that conversation is, the better for the staffer, for the intern.
Yeah, absolutely, because they can, like, finish the tally, right? Get it entered into whatever their software is, and then move on to the next person, or chill and like, check out Instagram.
And is it so when you're using 5 calls or just whatever, you're making the call on your own or whatever, there's I guess a 50-50 shot that you're going to get a live person or the voicemail. And does either option work? Like,
yeah, I mean, for the large part, yeah, like, you can do either. There are people who, even though they know exactly what the call is going to be like, they want to call and leave a voicemail because they just don't want to. They don't want to have the hassle of talking to somebody, and so they call, in the evenings after the office is closed, or they call on the weekends, and that's when they make their calls.
Okay,
and that's fine. Like, unless you're someone like Ted Cruz is notorious for not answering the phone in his offices. And his voicemail boxes fill up incredibly quickly. And then when they're full, like, I don't know, no one's checking them for a couple days. So there's just no way you can get in contact with that office, right? For the most part, like, I'm talking, 90% of people, if you're leaving a voicemail, it's going to be checked the next morning. It's someone's job to come in and say, let's go through the voicemails. Let's tally all the people who've left a voicemail. Now it's empty and you can leave a voicemail again.
Now, see, that to me, because that I guess part of it is like, it slips my mind really, because I have so much going on in my head of mine that it's like after hours by the time I think about it. So now it's good to know that, it's not frowned upon, I guess, to call after hours or on the weekend, especially if, like, you're someone like, whether you're like me, who is a combination of very forgetful, or even like, I don't want to have that human interaction, and you can kind of work your way to that human interaction if you have the passion to get there, or whatever, about a certain subject. Because it's like, I'll often remember, like, at like 8:00 at night, like, oh shit, I should have did my 5 calls. And then I put it off till the next day, into which I'm already going, like, I'm going to forget because I have 10 other things on my agenda to do, and then all of a sudden it's 8:00 again. So
yeah, I'm always surprised. Like, we post, like, tips like that on Twitter every once in a while, and the response is always like, "Oh, that's so great! I didn't know you could do that." Right? I didn't know, like, it's something that's, like, just as effective as calling during regular hours. And for me, I'm just like, I'm in the weeds all day. Like, this stuff doesn't, like, register on like what I'm thinking about day to day. So I don't understand that, like we really need to do a better job of explaining this to people who are coming to the site, right? You're coming to the site after hours and you're like, oh, okay, well, it's after hours. I'll do that tomorrow, right? If we had something on the site that was like, hey, this office is probably closed. It's after, 6 p.m. In the local time zone, you can still call, leave a voice. Likely you'll get a voicemail right now. More feedback like that, I think, could be really useful for some people.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and this, for me, someone like me, like, I know about the service because I heard it from another podcast, and I've just kind of looked at the site or the app a few times. So, like, if someone like me, probably, I wouldn't even see that, and I would have to literally be, like, told, like I am now, my hand has to be held because I am a big baby when it comes to life, to how to do everything. I've seen other services that are similar to where you can type something up into, like, a text box or something, and it either sends a fax or it sends an email. What's the most, is calling the most effective way? Like, does that tally mark count more than other forms of communication?
So here's what I like to say about how to contact with your reps. You can do something that's super, super easy for you, like signing a petition online or something, right? And it's understood that that's like something that is super low effort for people to do. So that's interpreted by the office as someone put not a lot of effort into that. That's how much they care about this issue, right? Towards the entire other end of the spectrum is you can literally walk into your representative's office and you can say, hey, I'd like to chat with somebody about this and this issue. You can make an office appointment with them, try and get in touch with someone there and do that sort of thing. That is obviously very high level of effort. And they understand that that's like someone has gone through a lot of effort to try and come to our office and talk to us about this issue that obviously means a whole lot to them. What we're trying to do with calls is pick something that is in the middle. It doesn't take very long out of your day, but it still gets over that hump of like you're putting some effort in. It's easy for you to do. It's tallied immediately. Some of the things that are faxes, the faxes are all digitized and they come in basically as like PDFs in an email for representatives. And these things maybe aren't tallied for a week or 2 weeks. So if you're calling on something that is that's a bill that's going to be voted on tomorrow, your call is going to get tallied right away, or it's going to be tallied the next morning if you're doing a voicemail. If you're sending like a fax that's digitized and then someone has to look through all of that stuff and figure out all the information that you're trying to, get to them over this fax, it's going to take them longer to do that. So it's not going to happen, as immediately. So that's why we try and encourage calls. I think if you're going to get involved, I think it's the most effective use of your time for how much effort you get out of it.
Yeah, it's definitely a better appealing thing than having to walk into an office for me. And I think that's because really it wasn't until there was something that happened. I don't know if it was earlier this year, but there's something ridiculous that happened that I was like, I'm finally going to use this soapbox of mine, this dopey podcast to kind of like just, help the resistance or whatever. And help, let people know that, get your voices heard and whatnot. And of course that, I took a couple months off from actually doing any podcasting because I had a mental break that was probably unrelated to what happened, but, that's the I don't know, phone calls. Yeah. That I can get on board with. I couldn't even tell you in Bucks County where I would have to go to walk in somewhere and then have to, I still get nervous after, I think I just did my 12th live show. I still get nervous when I have to stand in front of a crowd doing that, let alone having to talk to someone about a serious issue. Like having to be serious for 20 minutes is insane to me.
And you're concerned that you're like, oh, I don't know the issue well enough, or someone's going to be like, well, what about this? And you're like, I don't know. I just feel strongly about this. I don't know all the details. Yeah. Yeah. We try and make it like really, really easy for people to get involved with.
Yeah.
With the assumption that like, if you feel that strongly about something, maybe you're going to start with a phone call, but if it's really a big issue for you, you're going to, take the next step, maybe volunteer for someone who's running for that office coming up. If you don't support what the candidate is doing, maybe if you really like what the candidate is doing because they always support the things you're calling about, then maybe you'll volunteer for their campaign next time. That sort of stuff. So it's all about like there's been this disconnect, right? Like are the people that represent us? We don't really feel like they're hearing what we're saying. We don't really maybe understand what they're doing all day, right? And making that connection a little bit more of a real thing between you and them. Maybe it gives you a little bit more of an opinion of whether or not they're doing a good job for you, whether or not they're being a good representative for your district.
It's something, and this is going back, I guess, to the actual like 2016 campaign. Is like it seems like there was a big disconnect with the younger people this time around. Like it seems like with the Obama runs, like he was able to connect to young people and get them out to vote. Do you know like why, or do you have an opinion on what happened, or am I wildly misinformed here? Like it just seems like that was the missing link this time around. Like a lot of young people didn't go out and vote.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a large a displeasure with how politicians not just behave, but how they like communicate with people,
Mm.
right? They don't feel like if they're going to go on TV and do a press conference or whatever, that's not connecting with like you or I. We're expecting the people who are like public figures in our lives to like go on Instagram and it feels like they're talking directly to you and like like do Snapchat and bullshit like that. And this sort of old style national politics of like I'm going to talk to the media and then the media is going to disseminate my information to everybody doesn't work anymore because like people don't read newspapers, right? They get their information on Facebook or Twitter. Like it's being sent through these channels that are individuals in our community that we trust rather than someone who like is on the nightly news or someone who writes an article in a newspaper. And I think if you don't connect with people in that right way, specifically, like we're talking about young people, right? If you don't connect with young people in that way, I can't say millennials anymore because millennials are like everybody under 40 or like people who are, 40 to like 20 or whatever.
Yeah, and I have a problem with that because
So-
I am I'll be 35 in less than a week here, or in about a week, and I 100% feel like I'm on that border of like of Gen Xer and millennial, like because there's technology and stuff that scares me, like a Gen Xer gets scared from technology, and then there's like I'm also not. I don't know. I just I also get technology at the same time. And there was a wonderful article that I read that I'll have to try to find again. But someone like that felt like me, like felt like they grew up with VHSs, but they also don't really get Instagram or Snapchat, like especially Snapchat. Like I don't. Snapchat scares the heck out of me because it seems like such a young person thing to do. So someone that felt like me, they coined the perfect term of Zennial, with an X. And that's like, that's perfect. All right. Now I get it. Like I always, and I don't know why it matters. Cause like it doesn't, but like, I always had a problem defining my generation and my generation's name. And I feel like that's a good one. Like that's cause millennials, I feel like they get they get unfairly treated by anyone that's older, but I'm older, like I'm part, like, and then the young kids look at me like you're such a dumb Gen Xer or whatever. Like I feel like it's not a happy middle. It's not a happy place when you're
Right.
34, 35.
Yeah, it's a weird place to be. I'm right there too. So like I grew up on like the early social web, right? So it was all about like, you're building this profile and everyone can see everything you've done. And, like, I've got tweets back to 2007 and like, you can look through all of them and whatever. And now everyone's like, nope, nothing I did on the web like past last week is going to survive, right? I just want everything to disappear after I post it. And that's like, I don't know. People like to say that it grew out of like sexting, right? You want to like send your nudes to people and then like you want them to disappear so they can't come back and bite you. I'm not sure I quite get that because that can't be that. Like that can't be the reason for like everything, like you wanting to be on like Snapchat and Instagram and like having things just delete, right? Like it's not that pervasive, right?
I don't think so. I mean, I know nothing about Snapchat. It's something that I don't even want to get into. Like I feel the most comfort. Like Facebook is let me share pictures of my kids, and Twitter is where I promote everything. Like that's where I'm. Yeah,
exactly.
That's where I am with social media, and I probably would have a bigger audience if I knew how to use anything else. But I am very. This is like I think this is the Gen Xer in me. I'm very happy with not going beyond my comfort zone of social media.
Yeah, maybe it's just like when we get to this age, right? We don't need to learn anything new, right? My parents are totally happy. They're like, Facebook is great. Like maybe they'll venture into Instagram sometimes and post some pictures, but mostly it's like, let's give me the thing that I knew. I did a lot of work to get on Facebook. Like I'm gonna hold down my fort here, and this is where I am. If you want to post something that I see, like post it to Facebook, and you know that, right? You have your different audiences in different places.
Yeah. And it is weird being like kind of like just now realizing that I'm finally like my parents, where like I won't try new things in certain aspects of my life. Like I have a real hard time going completely digital with things because I like to have the physical DVD, even though like you don't even get the fun booklet anymore. But there's something about having that case. Same thing with like
Yeah.
music. I've gone like I can deal without having a CD. I actually I'm not like a big music guy, so like for me to say this is weird, but like for Christmas I got like one of those throwback. It's like 7-in-1 CD, cassette, vinyl, radio players because I like the
Wow.
idea of having vinyl for some reason, even though I'm not like I've always been a talk radio guy. So like I'm really selective with what I buy. Like the only thing I own on vinyl right now is the Last Jedi, no, Force Awakens, one of the Star Wars soundtracks I have on vinyl. Which has led me to saying, oh, I got to get the Guardian soundtrack on vinyl because that's going to sound awesome. But like,
Yeah, but no one's like,
good.
no one's collecting like CDs, right? Like vinyl's a special thing that people do. Like, and for whatever reason, I don't. To be honest, I don't quite get it perfectly. But my wife collects a lot of old vinyl, and like, I don't see her going out and being like, I got to get that like, first CD pressing of something that came out in the mid '90s, right? It's a different thing. No one's collecting like 8-track tapes, right?
But that's not included on this player. The cassette is. I was surprised that there was a cassette because like, and you can still buy Plank cassettes. Like if you go to like a Rite Aid or something or a local drugstore, there's still not only there's the dictation cassettes, which is weird because like iPhones, and then there's like regular cassettes like. I don't know what you use them for. I guess there's still like a market for people to put things on like a mixtape or whatever, but that's strange to me. The vinyl, like you said, I get, and like I'm not like looking to go buy original vinyls at all. There's just something kind of cool about having the like something that I really enjoy on something special, I guess. Like if I'm being honest, one of the big reasons is I'm a huge fan of Kevin Smith and his world. And they Tell Him Steve Dave is a podcast with some of his friends, and they do what they call vinyl cast. They'll do special episodes where they raise money by selling vinyl pressed versions of their podcast. And
oh wow, that's like...
that's the talk radio. Like I'm a big podcast guy. Like I listen to way too many podcasts. Like so much so like I listen on 1.5 times speed because there's just so many that I listen to in a given week. So and I love the medium of podcasting because it's like the Wild Wild West still. Like you don't have to deal with the FCC or anything. So like the idea that they're like these guys who I think are really funny have like this special collector's item for their podcast on this medium from that was around before I was alive. It's just it's like such a cool concept and was what led me to getting something that would play vinyls in the first place.
Okay, so tell me like what part of your day do you carve out? I mean, obviously this is like sort of like your thing, right? But what part of your day do you carve out to listen to podcasts? Because I have not been able to find, I don't have a commute. So I haven't been able to find like a perfect time where I'm like, I can sit down, I can listen to this podcast. I'm not doing anything else. I can't just put it on the background because like I find that like I get engrossed in some article on the internet and then like 5 minutes goes by and I realize like I haven't been paying attention. I got to go back 5 minutes and figure out what's going on.
So I will, I have my commute. I have about a 45-minute to hour commute to work and back home. So and I listen to them at 1.5 times speed. So usually I can get like a podcast and a half in, if not more, in that commute. Then I also, when I'm cutting the grass, which I don't know that maybe that's not an issue you have if you live in California. Like, I don't know. Are there yards?
I don't have grass now, unfortunately.
I was going to say.
I mean, some people maybe in the suburbs. I do not have grass, so that is not a thing. So,
but like that's you, and I'm on a corner property in Bucks County, so like it's a big-ish property, like not super big, like it's not. I don't know. Are you where from Philadelphia are you originally from?
I grew up in Conshohocken.
Okay, so I live in Bucks County, which is probably about 45 minutes to an hour outside, like away from Conshohocken. But I don't like I live in Levittown, like if that means anything to you. So it's like just above like like white trash in Levittown. It's not like the rich parts of Bucks County that we live in, but still, like, it's like corner property is a corner property. So it usually takes me, if
Yeah.
I'm not like, it probably takes me to do the front yard if I'm taking my time with everything and weed whacking and everything, probably like an hour or so to do the front yard, and then
Oh,
an
Jesus.
hour or so to do the
That must be brutal, especially like this time of year. Oh my God, I can't even
well,
imagine.
I speed up a little bit this time of year, and I also try to do it early in the morning or later at night. And I also let it go. I don't do it every week. I try to do it every other week, if not a little longer, just to I'm not doing it as often in the summer. And like the last few days have been brutal out here. It's been like 100 degrees most of this week. Like real temperature's been 100, and then like, the days that it's been like 95, it might as well be 100. But yeah,
Ugh.
so like yard work and even like cleaning the house is like I'll throw it on in my headphones. I always make sure I have my headphones in a pocket with me, so that I can listen.
Yeah.
Even my small commute, like if I'm going to the store, I throw it on and I have my headphones with me so that if all right, I'll just it's on my Bluetooth in the car. Then I throw the headphones on when I park the car, and I'm just continuing on my shopping trip. So I just
Yeah.
pretty much any chance I get, I listen to a podcast. Even at work, it's harder. Like you said, it's harder to do. Sometimes I will. It depends on the podcast. Like for instance, there's certain podcasts that I listen to that are like actual play, like One Shot. Where now One Shot's a bad example because that one I like to like put my full attention to. But there's other actual play podcasts for Dungeons and Dragons, role playing games, and all that stuff that I'll listen to. That's more like this is like a 20-minute podcast. I'm just kind of like have it on as background. So those are the ones that I'll listen to at
Yeah.
work, like the background ones. But yeah, I just find all the time in the world. I do my best.
That's I mean, it makes a lot of sense, right? Like you love podcasts. Like of course you would do that.
Yeah, and my biggest suggestion is like listening, and maybe it is my fiance is not a fan of podcasts. She thinks they're silly. She'd rather just listen to the radio. But she started listening to My Favorite Murder, which is a super popular true crime podcast with a couple comedians. And so it's like, all right, you're listening to this. I'm gonna start listening to it because like then we can talk about it. And
Yeah, there's always like a genre
Yeah.
that everyone can get into, and people think like podcast is it's just nerds talking about nerd stuff, or it's just this. But then there's like weird stuff like Serial and like
Yeah.
like other stuff like Welcome to Night Vale, which is like there's everything.
But it's funny because like I said earlier, I like to listen at 1.5, and she'll listen at regular. So we took a little road trip, like in 24 hours, we drove from the Philadelphia area to South Carolina and back again. It was she sells LuLaRoe, the legging company that all the women love, and
Yeah.
so they have a warehouse in South Carolina that we had the opportunity to go like pick our own clothing. So when I was driving, I'd throw My Favorite Murder on, but I listened it to 1.5 times speed, and she listens at normal speed. So like she's complaining at how fast they sound, and then when she's driving, she's playing it from her phone at 1 time speed, and like if you ever listen to something on a regular basis at 1.5 time, you get used to it. So all of a sudden, like they don't sound normal anymore when they're talking normal speed. Like they sound really they sound all from the South, like really slow, drawn out. And it's jarring when I have friends who I listen to at 1.5 times speed, and then like I'll see them a month or two after I listen to their podcast and be like, oh my God, whoa. It's weird hearing you in real life.
That's great. I love I totally get the podcast angle, but I love that you have people that you know in real life where you're like, that's not your voice. Your voice is normally like at least 50% faster than this.
It is nuts. And it's very quick that like as I'm talking to them, like my I guess it's just in your head, like something readjusts to where they start to sound normal again at one time, like in real life talk. It's I'm so engrossed in the medium. It's something that I really enjoy, something that like I volunteer for the podcast festival every year. I try to put on as many shows as I can throughout the year to try and make it like out in California, probably more so in LA and in New York City, that it's something that like people will come from other parts of the country to perform at and do. But I feel like Philadelphia is they're not there yet. And I want it to like, Philadelphia is in a creative boom. Like you can come to Philadelphia and get, yeah, you're not going to find much TV or film work here, but there's a lot of great stage work happening. There's a lot of great like comedy and improv happening. And something I would love to see happen in the next decade is like you're walking down a street in Philadelphia and you have the option to go see, something on Walnut Street at the Walnut Street Theater or something, or you can walk down to Good Comedy and see a comedy show. You can go to Philadelphia Improv and see an improv show, or you can go to whatever the podcast theater is going to be, and you can go take in a 1 hour comedy podcast or something.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I'm sort of like new to this whole performance podcast medium. I hadn't really heard of it before that. Like my experience with podcasts is mostly, developer related stuff. So people put out regular produced podcasts about, topics or like, Apple stuff or developer related stuff. And usually the only time people get together to do a live show is if they can find an audience. So you have a big group of developers coming together for a conference and you do a live show during that or something like that. Right. But the idea of like, recording a show in front of a live audience or doing something like that, I think is it could be applied way more liberally to podcasts.
Yeah. And there's like the in Philly, like I said, the best part about like the podcasting scene right now, like Philly has a really strong independent podcast scene. Every year the festival has, I've been involved with the festival I just finished my 3rd year with the festival. The first year there was 40 plus shows. Last year there was 50 plus shows. And this year there was about 60 or more shows. And almost all of them are independently done here in Philadelphia or the greater Philadelphia area. We had a few people starting last year, the festival people who run it, they started bringing in quote unquote bigger names. So like if you mentioned Night Vale, I don't know if you listened to it, but Hal Lublin is originally from Montco, I believe. And he's been a voice on Night Vale. He hosts the podcast We Like This with Mark and Hal. And he comes out now last year and this year to do his podcast. And Last Podcast on the Left, which is another true crime one, came out and did it this year. So there's maybe like a handful of bigger national acts that come out now, which is cool. It helps put, more, spotlight on the whole festival. But it's largely independent Philly podcasts, which is great. And there's a little bit of everything. There's comedy, there's sports talk, there's straight up like this show that we're doing. My show live is more of like a late night talk show, so it's part comedy, part interview. But there's people that literally just like, there's a show called Philly Famous that sat down with somebody for a whole hour and talked to them in front of an audience, and that that's something that I love. That I think what we're doing right now is perfect for like the earbud listener. I don't know that I could make our conversation interesting for a live crowd without doing a whole late night gimmick behind it. Hence the reason I do a monologue and then I have like a game, and then I have like a 20-minute conversation to a 30-minute conversation with you, and then I have a stand-up comedian come out and do a bit. And it feels like that's, I don't know. To me, it's wild that you can make this 1 hour conversation work in front of a live audience, because there's no performance to this, right? Like it's just you and I talking.
There needs to be something else, like some more, more of an interesting personality there. Like no one follows me and they're like, oh, I got to go check out that podcast Nick was on. But I'm sure you could find people who are like have a following and will. People will be like, oh, great, they were on a podcast. They're promoting that on their Twitter or whatever. Like, yeah, I'm going to go check out that podcast, right? or I'm going to go, see that live for an hour or whatever.
I think if like, and now if I would say, this is probably like the most political this show has ever gotten, what we talked to, like how we talk today. But for example, like if this was a political podcast, then yeah, I think I could sit down with you for an hour in front of an audience and we could chat, because that's going to be a really niche audience that's there, because they know they're coming to see a political show, versus like, hey, I'm going to go do the Tonight Show, but my version of it. Like that's such like
Right.
even this show on a regular basis, I'll talk to a comedian, I'll talk to I'll talk to I'll talk to a writer, I'll talk to a musician. Like there's not many people I won't talk to. There's like I have a small like list in my head of like I won't talk to this person or I won't talk to this group of like I don't want to say group of people, that sounds really wrong, but like this industry, for instance, like I want like there's certain
Sure.
things that like I just don't want to have on my show. But other than that, like it's like there is no niche audience here. It's very general. So there's people that hop in and out of the show depending on the guests that they want to hear. I know that. I'm not a fool. That no one's here to listen to me week in and week out. But if you have that niche audience, you can totally do an hour conversation live. But my show, you can't. But there's talk shows. There's the comedy shows. There's comic book stores are great. Like what I've learned is like when I want to do my show live, I have to like we usually do it at a bar if we want to do a late night type of format because it just seems like the right venue. But if we go to a comic book store to do our show live, we either tailor it to be like a really geeky show, or we tailor it completely differently and we play a game for the entire hour. So but Philadelphia, I don't think there's another city that has as big of an independent podcast scene as Philadelphia. People have argued with me about it. But
no, this is something I'm interested in. Like what, as I'm not really used to this whole like independent podcast scene, like what are there other big cities that are like very specifically into this sort of thing?
I would say the other city that I think is that has this following of podcasts like this is Chicago. Chicago seems to be, they have, I think they're a little bit more mainstream than us, and bring in bigger acts when they do a festival. But they also have a very big homegrown independent scene. One Shot, which I've mentioned 2 or 3 times already tonight, they're from Chicago. And a lot of the guests he has on are also like either comedians or podcasters or both, and they're all in that Chicago area. And they're the only 2 cities that I know have a big independent podcasting scene. I don't know. I guess the argument could be made LA and New York as well. I just don't know how independent it is. Like, it seems like if you go to LA, everyone that has a podcast out there is like, you can also watch on TV or film,
It's like
Yeah. And New York, I just don't know enough about their podcast scene to really like, it just feels like New York is LA light in every other medium, so why not in podcasting too?
They've got enough other stuff going on, right? They don't need anything to like podcasting to define them.
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, podcasting as performance is something that I feel is on the rise, and it's. So you're in San Francisco, you said?
Yeah.
So how far from LA is that?
Like 5-hour drive.
Oh wow.
Or like it's like a quick flight, right? It's like maybe an hour and a half or something.
Well, definitely not worth going to find a local show out in LA for a 5-hour drive. But I'm like, I feel like
probably not. No.
But I feel like, even what I know about podcasting in California, I know like the only one I listen to on a regular basis is Kevin Smith, and a few of his podcasts. I know he goes, I don't know if he's been to San Francisco, but I know like he goes around different areas of California to do the show. They might all be within like a small distance from LA, which I guess could be up to an hour and a half away from what I remember of LA traffic. But
isn't everything in LA an hour and a half away?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I would say like if you can seek it out and there's something going on in San Francisco, give it a try, because it's there's not, it's not often that I find a bad podcast, especially when they're performing live, because that's when they're on their A game, or they should be.
Did you do a lot of preparation? You just did like a late night show, right?
Yeah.
Like a live one?
Yeah.
Did you what was the preparation that goes into something like that for you?
So my podcast career for the last several years has been like no prep. When I do this sit down show, like the fact that I knew what I knew about fivecalls.org is the most prep I do on any interview, because I like to have a more natural conversation, like something like
I'm honored.
Yeah. Hey, you should be, because the fact that I knew your website is a big plus. But the fact that I know very little about you and your service, I think makes it a more unique conversation, and definitely more interesting to me. And at the end of the day, no offense to my audience, that's what I'm looking for, is having a good conversation for me, and then hopefully my audience loves it too, or your audience, or the Five Calls audience, or whoever's listening to this. But the live shows, there's always way more prep. And this one particular that we just did, I did I feel like the most amount of prep for, but also like it was all very last minute. Like it came together within like days of the show. I'm not a comedian at all. Anyone that listens to this show will attest to that. And so the hardest piece for me is the monologue, because I am really bad at writing jokes. The first year we did this show live, I did a 20-minute monologue and it felt really bad. So now we know that if we're going to write jokes, we keep it to like 2 or 3 jokes, and we'll start writing the jokes. So we performed on July 1st. I want to say 3 weeks out, we started writing jokes, me and my co-host. On my live shows, I have a co-host, my Ed McMahon, if you will, because I can keep my monologue short and then go to a sit down conversation where we kind of just have a topic prepared, and then just riff off of that. And then we in shows past that was the late night style, we would just like kind of throw together a quick trivia game or something. We spent the last 3 weeks designing a game from scratch called Food Fright, which was a challenge of 4 games, kind of combining a game that I read about on Price is Right and Fear Factor, to where we had like this silly Oreo cookie challenge where you couldn't use your hands to eat the cookie. Then we bumped it up to Bean Boozled, which is a horrible game. Have you heard of Bean Boozled?
I have not.
So Bean Boozled, my son who is 6 loves it. Bean Boozled is this game where you have a little spinner and you spin it and it tells you to eat this, we'll say, orange jelly bean. And this orange jelly bean is either going to taste like an orange creamsicle or barf.
Now I can see. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Now the kicker is I don't like jelly beans. Like even if you handed me a handful of pink Starburst jelly beans, I will not eat them. They are awful.
No, they're terrible.
The texture of a jelly bean, it makes me want to throw up. So when I don't play the game anymore, because it got to the point where whether it was the good flavor or the bad flavor, all tasted the same or worse.
There's no winning for you. Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I made my co-host play this game, but we played Bean Boozled, which was fun. Like, cause the reaction of my co-host and the audience member playing was priceless. And then we played, this donut challenge where I took one donut was cream filled and one donut was filled with kids' toothpaste, because my fiance thought it would be wrong to give them real toothpaste. But the guy that ate it, I got the cream donut. I lucked out. He got the toothpaste donut. He took 2 bites of it because he enjoyed it because it was kids' toothpaste. So
that is, yeah.
So next year I'll use real toothpaste.
They make those. Yeah, they make those toothpaste way more appetizing than they should be.
And the final challenge was the Pocky Haunted Ghost Pepper Chip Challenge, where we got a pack of Pocky chips.
Oh God, yeah.
That were incredibly hot. And two ended up being me and 2 audience members who wanted to compete against each other. And then because the earlier rule was I was going to go chip for chip, I had to do it still too. But yeah, it was just that was the most prep. And then you're when you have a guest on again, you do a little bit of prep for the live show just because you have to find a guest to do the live show. So when you're finding a guest to do the live show, it tends to be you're reading naturally. You're just doing more research. But even then, again, my research is very little for the guest because I like this natural conversation. So most of the work for a live show for me goes into everything leading up to the guest and then also finding the guest because that's the hardest part.
Yeah, that feels like it's very like a very visual, like all these like food related things, right?
Yeah.
Like it must be difficult to balance like what's going on like physically there that the audience can obviously see versus like things you have to explain or talk through so that like it's also understandable for a podcast audience.
Yeah, and that was I probably didn't do a good job this year doing that because in years past our games was visual / audio friendly because it was just asking questions or doing silly voices or something like that. If we played a game called Noisy Person Cards, which is kind of like Cards Against Humanity except a little nerdier, and so all that kind of like worked for the live audience because they got prizes, and it also worked for the listening audience. I'd say Food Fright. I'd like to say that we made it work for the listening audience. I mean, you can listen to the most recent episode. Episode 127 is the live episode. You can listen to that, audience, and let me know if we made that work for you if you weren't there.
I will, yeah.
But I will have to now that you say it, I probably have to sit down and think of a way to kind of make that work for the listening audience as well. A little bit better than I did because I didn't. And not consciously, unconsciously, I didn't even think about how it would sound on microphone. But yeah, it's fun. I don't know what's available out in San Francisco, but if any podcasters that are listening that are in the San Francisco area do a live. I think everyone should do a live show because regardless, everyone's going to have an audience. Every show has some sort of audience, and something that I've learned from other podcasters here in the Philly area and just from doing it myself is like sometimes like I've done it where there's one person in the audience. I've done it where there's been 0 people in the audience. And what you have to do is take that opportunity to say like, well, this is just a cool experience recording in this space and kind of, I guess kind of just like taking it for what you have and just being happy. Like, cause and I don't know if this relates to you in any way because I assume you don't do a podcast. It hasn't come up, but
No.
if you sit down and if you were to sit down with your friends to talk about something, how many people do you expect to sit around watching you talk about this thing with your friends?
Gosh. Not too many, no.
Yeah, like usually, like the answer is 0. Like I don't expect anyone to sit around to listen to me talk about 5 calls.org. Like as far as I'm concerned, like this is a conversation. Now I know that there's going to be, I know my audience. My audience, it's not the biggest audience in the world, but I have an audience that's going to sit down and listen to this and enjoy this conversation. But at the end of the day, like. The fact that like there's even 5 people that come to a show that I did in a comic book store a couple months ago or a year ago or whatever, like that's 5 people that like, why are they listening to me talk? Like that's the way I kind of look at it, especially as an independent podcaster, because you're going to have days where you have 0 to 5 people in your audience. And you might have a day where you have, like we did a show at Wizard World Comic-Con where we had 75 people in the audience. So like, that's you're going to have that range as an independent podcaster where you might hit 5 people, you might hit 70 people, who knows?
Yeah. And like there's a long storied history of basically you being able to be in San Francisco and go to your choice of a number of like 5 different types of talks on, obscure frameworks for technical stuff any night of the week, right? So any of those things could be a live podcast, and that stuff pulls in easily, 20 people on a bad night, regardless of what the topic is, right? Because people just like to go and listen about the newest developments and whatever it is.
Yeah, no, Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the medium. I'm a huge fan of people doing it live. Like, there's not much about podcasting I hate, except for like the actual work behind it. The sitting down and talking, and the sitting down and performing or standing up and performing parts are all great. The stuff that's promoting it and editing it and putting it out there to the world, that's all the stuff that's like, oh God, I wish like I could pay someone to do it, but you know, it's you give and take. So we've definitely gone over the hour I normally keep my guests for. So I thank you for hanging out extra long with us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And I definitely, you know, I'm going to keep you for just a couple minutes longer because if you don't mind, do you have time?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I appreciate this. This is my like my monthly dose of Philadelphia accent that I don't get very often.
My God.
So
do I have a Philly
I'm fine
accent?
with this, yeah.
Oh,
of course, yeah.
Oh, wow. I don't hear it at all. I mean, I guess that's typical, but
I don't know.
because it's funny, I'll hear people, and obviously they're comedians doing the Philly accent, so it's obviously over exaggerated. But like,
it's way over the top. Yeah, if Tina Fey does the Philly accent, it's like way over the top. But there's definitely a bit of it that you can hear. Like if I go home and I talk to my parents on the phone, I get a little bit of it, right?
Yeah.
And you could definitely, there are certain things you listen for. Yeah.
And the only thing I know that I have is, and actually I only know because people have said it so many times, is I have that nasally O that every Philadelphian has. Oftentimes I used to travel for work, so it would be fun to hear other people's accents. And one of my favorite places to go was the Massachusetts area and getting that Boston accent. And that New England accent. And one time I used to install point of sales for gas stations. So I was installing a point of sale at some gas station, and there was a clerk there who like was there because she was just working the overnight shift. And she's talking in her Boston accent and New England accent. And I don't say anything of it, but I asked I was like, hey, do you mind grabbing me a Coke so I can test the scanner out? She said, grab you a what? I'm like, a Coke. And she goes, a what? I'm like, Coke, C-O-K-E, a soda, like what, a pop? What do you want me to say here? And she's like, oh, a Coca-Cola. You said it really weird. And she's talking in her Boston accent. I'm like, wait a second, you're saying I said something weird? I was like, do you hear yourself? I got into an argument with this, like a fun argument with this lady. I was like, yeah, like watch a movie. Unless it's set in Boston, everyone sounds like me. and it's the first, that was the first time I realized that, like, and I still don't realize it, but like, I guess when I say Coke, like there's something with my O that's like a nasally long, I guess nasally and drawn out O or something. I don't really get it. But yeah, it's so weird when people say you have a Philly accent. I'm like, really? I don't understand it.
Yeah, it's definitely, that's one of those words that's distinctive. Yeah.
And I think it's anything with that, just that nasally O. And I don't have the, like, I say water, like I say water normal. Like I don't say water like other people from Philly. I think that's like, you got to be from Philly, like the actual city, to have that water accent. And what's the other, like I don't even think I can fake it. The Eagles is what
the Eagles.
Yeah, I'm Eagles.
That's another one.
Yeah, I say Eagles, I say Beagles, I say Bagels. I don't think I say the words that like a lot of us get hit on from Philly. I don't really think I have. I think it's more just, I guess, like the slight little accent that I have. I guess I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't hear it.
It's more subtle, but it's definitely
Yeah, it's interesting. It's strange to hear someone say that, and I guess it's because because everyone else I talk to, they're not from the area, so like if they hear it, I guess they don't like. Maybe they do, and they don't say anything.
They're far more polite than I was.
Oh no, I love it because I just assume I sound like the like generic white guy is what I feel like I sound like. But it's good to know that at least it's generic Philadelphia guy.
Yeah.
So where I wanted to go is, I mentioned earlier that I've looked at the website and it feels like and you can tell me if I'm wrong here. Going back to fivecalls.org / is the app called 5 Calls as well, or is that called Make 5 Calls?
Yeah, the app is just 5 calls as well. You can go to if you just search for it on the App Store, just 5 calls, it'll come up for you.
So my question with that, because I have it on my phone and I haven't used it yet because I wanted to talk to you first about the differences with that and the website. And this is maybe my Gen Xer brain here. Is it seems like it would be easier to have it pulled up on my desktop so I could look at the script while I'm making the phone call. But is the script in front of you on the app as well? Like I know it's really easy to
It's tricky, yeah.
I know it's easy to say, hey, I want to call about this issue on the phone and here's my zip code. And it pulls up the information super easy, but I didn't get as far as actually making the call on the app. So how does that work with the script? Do you have to kind of be on speaker or a headset to get access to the script while on the app?
Yeah. So if you're on speaker, I'm sure you can. I know this from iOS, but I'm sure you can do it on Android too. You can switch back to a different app that's not the phone while you're on the phone call, right?
Yeah.
So presumably you're like wearing a headset or something. It's not like pressed up to the side of your face. You can switch back to the app and see the script there. But yeah, I mean, in some sense, it makes more sense if you're reading the script. If you don't know what to say, then maybe you pull it up on your desktop and you look at what the script is and you just dial the number in on your phone. One of the things that was definitely a blessing and a curse for us was that when we started out, a lot of people, we just had the website, and a lot of people were like, hey, this is really great. I'm an app developer. I do iOS or I do Android apps. I really want to help out. I want to make you a version of 5 calls for the App Store. And of course, at the time, we're like, yeah, that sounds awesome. Like, please go ahead and do that, and we'll figure out how it all works together, and we'll give people another way that they can get in touch with their representatives. And I know that the apps work great. The people who work on them are like super talented. So like we're incredibly lucky to have these people who are part of the team. But it's so hard to maintain all of this stuff. Like not just the website. If you want to add something new, you have to like put it on the website. You have to make sure that like someone who knows about doing the apps can put it into the app. Into both of the apps, because we have like an iOS one and an Android one. So it's a lot. It's a lot of things to keep track of. But it's good to have another channel that you can reach people, because some people just prefer an app, right?
Yeah.
They just want something they can download on their phone. It's always on their home screen. They can just tap on it and get them right in there. And some people are just like, oh, well, I'm always on my computer, or I always want to see the script in front of me while I'm making my call. So I'm always going to open it up on the computer anyway.
Yeah, and to me, even though I need to leave my Gen Xer brain, the app seems like it's the most sense. At least on like I said, using on the iPhone, it seems like idiot proof. Way like even I feel like it's more idiot proof than the website, because you can. I assume on the app, I just hit the phone number and it dials for me. Whereas if I'm looking at the website,
yeah, it dials it for you. It's great.
Yeah. Versus the website where I can misdial. It's like the app literally seems like it holds my hand even more than I needed it to be held, which is a good thing, a very good thing. I was just curious about like how the script works, and yeah, it makes sense that you can just use the speaker or headset.
Yeah.
All right. That being said, where can people find you or 5 calls? Where do you want to point people to? And how can people help you guys, keep this amazing service running?
I mean, if you want to just see what the service is all about, you can Google 5 calls or just go to 5calls.org. And it's super easy to get started. We walk you through all the process of getting in touch with your representative on, issues that probably pertain to you. If you want to stay more in touch, we're at Make 5 Calls on Twitter, tweeting about stuff, news, politics news as it comes out. So that's a little bit of a better way to keep in touch regularly if you happen to use Twitter and want to get more regular updates. But I just lead people to the website, 5calls.org. And even if you haven't contacted your representative before, it's super easy to do so. Give it a shot once and see if you like it. Maybe you'll come back the next time there's an issue that piques your interest.
And we'll be sure as we move on in the second half of this year here, or I don't know when this episode's releasing, but we're in the back half at this point, regardless. Part of the Everything is Awesome pledge to just do our part for the country, I guess, is we're going to have you've heard it on One Shot. You've heard it on a bunch of other podcasts. We're going to start doing at the end of the show. So if you're not into politics, you don't agree with our politics or whatever, we'll tag it on to the end of the show. So you don't have to deal with that bull. But for those of you that want to stick around, when I do my outro here, at the end of the show, we'll have a call to action that's something we believe in, and it's something that you can go to fivecalls.org or download the app and use to help support as well. Nick, thanks for doing the show.
Thanks for having me on. It was great.
All right, super friends. Thank you to Nick O'Neill for being on the show. Make sure you check out fivecalls.org. We'll get more to that in a second. If you're looking for more shows to listen to, make sure you check out Bullies Keep Out. Bullies Keep Out is a show where the founder of Bullies Keep Out, Dana, sits down and talks about important issues related to bullying, whether it's cyberbullying, whether it's mental illness, whether it's just all these important issues that can lead to bullying. She sits down and discusses this. Oftentimes she'll have a guest on to discuss bullying, and that organization does a lot of great things for like the Trevor Project. They're about to run a auction on to help support them. So make sure you check out Bullies Keep Out, the podcast on thatentertains.com/network. Super friends, we have on That Entertains a section of the site where we review comic books. I want you to check that out. On thatentertains.com, we do sit down with a handful of reviewers and we review comic books across the medium, mainly from Marvel and DC, but every now and then we get some indie publishers that want us to review comic books. We call this section of our site That Entertains Comic Universe, TECU. So make sure you check that out on thatentertains.com. You'll see daily posts usually, but definitely on Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, we are heavy on our comic book reviews. So check that out on thatentertains.com. And of course, we have a lot going on with the podcast network on thatentertains.com/network. Keep your eyes daily on that for changes, because we are now in a bit of a soft reboot with what things are going on. Everything is Awesome is there now. And of course, we have our Patreon at patreon.com/thatentertains, where you can support us at will. That would be great if you could do that. We like to end Everything is Awesome with a call to action. This episode featured Nick O'Neill, who is a co-founder of fivecalls.org, which is what we use, Super Friends, to make a difference. There are a lot of terrible things happening right now. It can feel like you can't do anything to help, but you can. It takes people like us to make a difference. And one of the easiest and most important ways, I've hammered it home in the intro, I hammered it home probably along with Nick in this episode, is to call your representatives about the issues that are important to you. When I call my reps, I use a site called fivecalls.org. That's the number 5calls.org. There are issue summaries of issues that are important to you, contact info for your representatives, and a script to read while you're on the phone to make sure your message gets across. Calling is quick, easy, and it's one of the most important ways to have your voice heard. It can make a tremendous impact. Let your voice be heard. Another call to action that I really want you to take a look at is there's been a purge on states' voter registrations. So it's so simple. Go to vote.org and verify that you are registered to vote. If it comes up that you're not, take 2 minutes to sit down and register to vote. The only thing more powerful than calling your representatives to let them know how you feel is your power to vote in every election. So make sure you're registered to vote and make your voice matter. Thank you to our supporters on patreon.com/thatentertains. If obviously we just launched today, so I don't know if we have any supporters, but hopefully you are supporting us now. And if you are, thank you so much. If you want to support us in a non-monetary way, word of mouth recommendations and 5-star rating reviews on iTunes are the best way to spread the good word of awesome. You can find us on @RealAwesomePod on Facebook.com and Twitter. You can also find us on Instagram @AwesomePodcast, and we're available on AwesomePodcast.com and of course thatentertains.com/network. You can get more news about this show at awesomepodcast.com and thatentertains.com. But more also on my personal Twitter at thatnerdykev is where I do a lot of things. If you're interested in ad rates, live appearances, help with your podcast, or have a question or comment, email us at awesome@crudehammerstudios.com. Everything is Awesome is a production of That Entertains Podcast Network in association with Crude Humor Studios. Crude Humor Studios is a Philadelphia-based production company specializing in audio. You can find more information at crudehumorstudios.com. Thanks for listening, Super Friends. We've been awesome.
That's Entertainment Podcast Network. Entertainment and culture. Artist owned, fan supported.